The alien research vessel Celestia drifted silently through Earth's outer atmosphere, its cloaking systems active as it observed the blue planet below. Hannah adjusted the sensitivity on her scanners, her four-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across the control panel. As the ship's lead xenobiologist, she found Earth particularly fascinating, a world teeming with life forms that evolved in what her people would consider extreme heat. Recording atmospheric composition, Hannah noted in the ship's log. Her voice was melodic but formal, as was typical for Cerealians. Nitrogen-oxygen mix with trace gases. Temperature readings consistent with previous scans. Unsuitable for prolonged Cerealian exposure. The warning lights flashed suddenly, bathing the research deck in pulsing red. Gravitational disturbance detected, announced the ship's system. Anomaly approaching at high velocity. Captain Minho rushed onto the deck. Status report. Before Hannah could respond, the Celestia lurched violently. The ship's hull groaned as unknown forces pulled it from its stable orbit. Hannah gripped her station as instruments sparked around her. Some kind of spatial rift, she shouted over the alarms. Our engines cannot compensate. Evacuation protocol initiated, Minho ordered. All personnel to escape pods immediately. Chaos erupted as the crew rushed to their designated evacuation points. Hannah grabbed her personal data unit and hurried toward the nearest escape pod. The ship shuddered again, throwing her against a wall. A section of ceiling collapsed, blocking her path forward. Hannah, divert to secondary evacuation point. Minho's voice crackled through her communicator. Pod Bay 4 is still accessible. She changed direction, racing through the trembling corridors. The ship was breaking apart around her. When she reached Pod Bay 4, only one escape pod remained. Hannah climbed inside and activated the launch sequence. The pod ejected from the failing research vessel, but instead of a controlled descent, it spun wildly, caught in Earth's gravitational pull. Emergency stabilizers failing, the pod's computer informed her. Preparing for crash protocol. Hannah secured herself in the crash webbing as the pod entered Earth's atmosphere. The heat shield glowed white-hot, and warning systems blared as the small craft plummeted toward the surface. Through the viewport, she saw forests and mountains rushing toward her. The impact knocked her unconscious. Hours later, Hannah awoke to unfamiliar sensations. Pain radiated through her body, a feeling Cerealians rarely experience given their controlled environment. Worse, her environmental suit was damaged, its temperature regulation systems offline. Earth's air had seeped in, and she felt a strange burning sensation spreading through her chest with each breath. Too hot, she gasped, trying to assess the damage. Her blue skin, normally pale and cool, felt flushed and warm. Cerealian biology was adapted to temperatures well below freezing. Earth's temperate climate was dangerously hot for her species. She tried to activate her emergency beacon, but found the communication system damaged beyond repair. The escape pod had broken open upon impact, leaving her exposed to the forest around her. Night was falling, bringing minimal relief from the heat. Hannah knew she needed to find shelter and repair her suit, or her body would soon begin to fail under these conditions. As she struggled to stand, a wave of dizziness overcame her. Her metabolism, evolved for efficiency in cold environments, was accelerating in response to Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. The sensation was overwhelming. Control, she reminded herself, using Cerealian meditation techniques to focus. Adapt. Survive. Hannah managed a few steps before collapsing again. Her vision blurred as her body fought against the alien environment. In the gathering darkness, she heard something approaching. Heavy footsteps crushing fallen leaves. A human appeared before her, tall, with dark hair and wide eyes that grew even wider at the sight of her. He carried some kind of pack and wore clothes suitable for hiking through the forest. What the human male stopped, clearly shocked. He cautiously approached, keeping a safe distance. Are you real? Hannah could not understand his words, but recognized his caution. She raised a hand in what she hoped would appear as a non-threatening gesture. The movement sent pain shooting through her arm. "Help," she said in her own language, knowing he wouldn't understand, but hoping her tone would convey her desperation. The human, June, though she didn't know his name yet, crouched down, studying her with a mixture of fear and fascination. He noticed her damaged suit and the blue skin beneath. When he saw her shivering despite the mild evening temperature, understanding seemed to dawn on his face. "You're cold?" "No, overheating," he asked, mimicking fanning himself. Hana nodded weakly, recognizing the universal gesture. Jun hesitated only briefly before making a decision. He removed his backpack and took out a water bottle, offering it to her. Hana recognized the liquid and took it gratefully. The cool water provided momentary relief as she poured some over her face and neck. "I have a cabin not far from here," Jun said slowly, pointing in a direction and mimicking a roof with his hands. "Shelter." When Hana tried to stand again, her legs gave way. Without hesitation, Jun moved to support her, then paused when he felt how cool her skin was despite her apparent distress. "You're like ice," he murmured, confused. To Hana, his touch felt scorching hot. She winced but allowed him to help her. As the strange human led her through the darkening forest, Hana felt the burning sensation inside her intensify. Earth's environment was changing her with each passing minute. Her carefully regulated cerealian biology was being forced to adapt at an unprecedented rate. By the time they reached Jun's small cabin, Hana could barely remain conscious. The human helped her inside and quickly turned down the heating system. He seemed to understand that she needed cooling, not warmth. As Hana collapsed onto a couch, her last thought before unconsciousness claimed her again was that her survival now depended entirely on this alien creature, this human who had found her broken and burning in a world too hot for her kind. Jun sat across from the unconscious alien, his mind racing with questions. He had gone hiking to clear his head after months of isolation working on his biochemistry research. Finding a blue-skinned creature from another world was definitely not on his agenda. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he whispered. The alien woman, at least he assumed she was female based on her humanoid form, lay still on his couch. Her skin was a pale blue color that reminded him of early morning frost. Periodically, she would shiver despite the cabin being quite cool. Jun had turned off the heating completely and opened several windows to create a chill in the room. He had wrapped her in wet towels to help lower her temperature, noticing that whatever crisis her body was experiencing seemed related to heat. The damaged suit she wore appeared designed for temperature regulation, with sections that might have once circulated cooling fluid. As dawn broke, Jun checked on his unexpected guest again. Her breathing had steadied, though it was much slower than a human's. He had spent hours researching on his satellite internet connection, searching for any news about UFO sightings or government alerts. Nothing. Whatever ship she came from had arrived undetected. The alien's eyes suddenly flew open. They were striking, large, with iridescent purple irises that seemed to shift color in the light. "You're awake," Jun said softly, keeping his distance. The alien woman sat up with surprising speed, then immediately clutched her head, clearly dizzy. She spoke in a musical language unlike anything Jun had ever heard. "I don't understand," he said, pointing to himself. "Jun." He repeated his name, then pointed at her questioningly. The alien watched him intently, then placed a hand on her chest. "Hana." "Hana," he repeated, smiling slightly. "Well, that's a start." She tried to stand but stumbled. Jun rushed forward to steady her, and she flinched at his touch. "Sorry," he said, quickly backing away. "Your skin, it feels cold, but you act like you're burning up." Hana looked at her hands, then around the room. Her gaze settled on the kitchen. She pointed to the refrigerator and made a pushing motion. "You want it colder?" Jun asked, mimicking a shiver. She nodded emphatically. "I can't make it much colder in here without some serious air conditioning, which I don't have," he explained, though he knew she couldn't understand. But maybe. He went to the freezer and returned with an ice pack, offering it to her. Hannah pressed it against her face with what looked like relief. "Better?" he asked. Instead of answering, she suddenly doubled over, making a strange gasping sound. June approached cautiously. "What's wrong?" Hannah placed a hand on her stomach, then mimed putting something in her mouth. The human, June, though she didn't know his name yet, crouched down, studying her with a mixture of fear and fascination. He noticed her damaged suit and the blue skin beneath. When he saw her shivering despite the mild evening temperature, understanding seemed to dawn on his face. "You're cold? No? Overheating?" he asked, mimicking fanning himself. Hannah nodded weakly, recognizing the universal gesture. Jun hesitated only briefly before making a decision. He removed his backpack and took out a water bottle, offering it to her. Hannah recognized the liquid and took it gratefully. The cool water provided momentary relief as she poured some over her face and neck. "I have a cabin not far from here," Jun said slowly, pointing in a direction and mimicking a roof with his hands. "Shelter." When Hannah tried to stand again, her legs gave way. Without hesitation, Jun moved to support her, then paused when he felt how cool her skin was despite her apparent distress. "You're like ice," he murmured, confused. To Hannah, his touch felt scorching hot. She winced but allowed him to help her. As the strange human led her through the darkening forest, Hannah felt the burning sensation inside her intensify. Earth's environment was changing her with each passing minute. Her carefully regulated cerulean biology was being forced to adapt at an unprecedented rate. By the time they reached Jun's small cabin, Hannah could barely remain conscious. The human helped her inside and quickly turned down the heating system. He seemed to understand that she needed cooling, not warmth. As Hannah collapsed onto a couch, her last thought before unconsciousness claimed her again was that her survival now depended entirely on this alien creature, this human who had found her broken and burning in a world too hot for her kind. June sat across from the unconscious alien, his mind racing with questions. He had gone hiking to clear his head after months of isolation working on his biochemistry research. Finding a blue-skinned creature from another world was definitely not on his agenda. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he whispered. The alien woman, at least he assumed she was female based on her humanoid form, lay still on his couch. Her skin was a pale blue color that reminded him of early morning frost. Periodically, she would shiver despite the cabin being quite cool. June had turned off the heating completely and opened several windows to create a chill in the room. He had wrapped her in wet towels to help lower her temperature, noticing that whatever crisis her body was experiencing seemed related to heat. The damaged suit she wore appeared designed for temperature regulation, with sections that might have once circulated cooling fluid. As dawn broke, June checked on his unexpected guest again. Her breathing had steadied, though it was much slower than a human's. He had spent hours researching on his satellite internet connection, searching for any news about UFO sightings or government alerts. Nothing. Whatever ship she came from had arrived undetected. The alien's eyes suddenly flew open. They were striking, large, with iridescent purple irises that seemed to shift color in the light. "You're awake," Jun said softly, keeping his distance. The alien woman sat up with surprising speed, then immediately clutched her head, clearly dizzy. She spoke in a musical language unlike anything Jun had ever heard. "I don't understand," he said, pointing to himself. "Jun." He repeated his name, then pointed at her questioningly. The alien watched him intently, then placed a hand on her chest. "Hannah. Hannah," he repeated, smiling slightly. "Well, that's a start." She tried to stand but stumbled. June rushed forward to steady her, and she flinched at his touch. "Sorry," he said, quickly backing away. "Your skin, it feels cold, but you act like you're burning up." Hannah looked at her hands, then around the room. Her gaze settled on the kitchen. She pointed to the refrigerator and made a pushing motion. You want it colder? June asked, mimicking a shiver. She nodded emphatically. I can't make it much colder in here without some serious air conditioning, which I don't have. He explained, though he knew she couldn't understand. But maybe. He went to the freezer and returned with an ice pack, offering it to her. Hannah pressed it against her face with what looked like relief. Better? He asked. Instead of answering, she suddenly doubled over, making a strange gasping sound. June approached cautiously. What's wrong? Hannah placed a hand on her stomach, then mimed putting something in her mouth. You're hungry? He asked, surprised. You metabolize food. He went to the kitchen and returned with various options. An apple, some bread, a protein bar. Hannah examined each carefully, finally selecting the protein bar. She sniffed it before taking a small bite. Her eyes widened with what might have been surprise or disgust, but she continued eating. Guess aliens need calories too, June muttered. As days passed, communication between them improved rapidly. Hannah had some kind of learning capacity that seemed enhanced compared to humans. She began picking up English words, starting with basic needs. Cold, hot, food, water. Within 3 days, she could form simple sentences. Body, burning, she told him on the 4th morning, her voice strained. Inside change. Your metabolism, June suggested. He had been observing her carefully. It's accelerating to adapt to Earth's atmosphere. Hannah nodded. Cerulean body. Slow, cold. Earth make fast, hot. She pointed to the window where sunlight streamed in. Star too close. Air too much. June had gathered that her species evolved in a much colder environment, perhaps a planet farther from its sun with a thinner atmosphere. Earth's oxygen-rich air and warmer climate were forcing rapid changes in her physiology. Human, she said suddenly, looking directly at him. What are you doing to my body? I'm burning up. The clear sentence surprised him. I'm not doing anything, he replied. It's Earth. Your body is adapting. Need communicate, she said, pointing to a damaged device she'd retrieved from her suit. Ship. Others. June examined the device. I can try to help, but this technology is, well, alien to me. As he worked to understand the communication device, Hannah explored the cabin with increasing energy. Her movements, initially slow and deliberate, became more fluid each day. She was adapting, physically changing before his eyes. One morning, June found her standing outside in the dawn light, staring at the rising sun with a mixture of fear and fascination. Dangerous, she said when she noticed him, but beautiful. The sun won't hurt you from this distance, he explained, but your eyes might be more sensitive than ours. Everything's sensitive, she replied, placing a hand on her chest. Feel too much. Heart too fast. May I? June asked, holding up a small medical scanner he used in his research. When she nodded, he ran it over her body, reviewing the readings. Your metabolic rate has tripled since you arrived. Your body temperature is rising to match. Becoming like human, she asked, alarm evident in her voice. Not exactly. You're still cerulean, but adapting. Evolving, maybe. That night, Hannah experienced what appeared to be fever dreams. June found her thrashing on the couch, mumbling in her native language. When he tried to help, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Too fast, she gasped in English. Mind changing too. Knowledge. Filling. June realized her neural pathways must be reorganizing, perhaps explaining her rapid language acquisition. It's okay, he soothed. Your body knows what it's doing. Not supposed to change, she insisted, her eyes wide. Ceruleans, same for 1,000 years. Maybe that's why you're struggling, June suggested. Your species doesn't adapt quickly, but humans do. We're constantly changing, evolving. Maybe Earth is pushing your biology towards something more flexible. Hannah finally calmed, though her skin felt warmer than before. Human, she whispered, looking at him with new understanding. You helping me? Why? June considered the question. He could have called authorities, but something held him back. Because you needed help, he said simply. And because I'm curious. I'm a scientist, like you. As she drifted back to sleep, June wondered what would happen next. The alien in his cabin was becoming something new. Neither fully Cerealian nor human, but something in between. And despite the danger and uncertainty, he couldn't help feeling privileged to witness such an extraordinary transformation. The morning sun filtered through the cabin windows as Hannah sat up suddenly, a sharp cry escaping her lips. June rushed into the living room to find her staring at her hands in horror. The pale blue of her skin now had faint pink undertones, and tiny beads of moisture had appeared on her forehead. Human, what are you doing to my body? I'm burning up, she cried, the phrase that had become her refrain over the past week. June approached carefully. It's not me, Hannah. It's Earth. Your body is changing to survive here. This not supposed to happen, she said, her English improving daily despite her distress. Cerealian stable, sane for generations. She touched her face, feeling the unfamiliar moisture. What is this water? You're sweating, June explained. It's how humans cool down. Your body is developing new ways to regulate temperature. Hannah's eyes widened. Cerealians never sweat. We live in cold. No need. She stood up, moving with increasing fluidity. Need to show you something. She led June to the bathroom, where she'd been sleeping in the bathtub filled with cold water. On the floor lay several translucent blue patches of what looked like shed skin. Started 3 days ago, she explained. Old skin falls away. New skin underneath. June crouched to examine the discarded patches. They were delicate, almost like fine parchment. May I? He asked, gesturing to her arm. When she nodded, he gently examined the new skin forming beneath a partially sloughed patch. Fascinating. Your new skin has more capillaries near the surface, better for heat radiation. Am I becoming human? Fear edged her voice. No, June assured her. You're still Cerealian. Your DNA wouldn't completely change, but you're adapting to Earth at an accelerated rate. Later that day, June took blood samples from Hannah with her permission. In his small lab area, originally set up for his independent research, he examined her blood under a microscope. This is incredible, he murmured. Your cells are incorporating Earth bacteria. He looked up at her. Your body isn't fighting them. It's forming a symbiotic relationship. What does this mean? Hannah asked, leaning closer to see. These microorganisms might be helping you adapt. Earth is full of bacteria that have evolved here for billions of years. They're experts at surviving in this environment. That night, the crisis intensified. June awoke to sounds of distress and found Hannah curled on the bathroom floor, her body shaking violently. Everything burns, she gasped, inside changing too fast. Her temperature had risen dramatically. For a Cerealian, she was running what would be a dangerous fever. June filled the bathtub with cold water and helped her in, clothes and all. She sank beneath the surface with relief, her eyes still open, watching him. Can you breathe underwater? He asked when she finally surfaced minutes later. Not before, she replied, confusion crossing her features. Now, lungs feel different. Can filter oxygen from liquid for short time. June stayed with her through the night, refreshing the cold water whenever it warmed too much from her body heat. By morning, Hannah's trembling had stopped, but new changes were evident. The ridges along her forearms had become more pronounced, and her eyes had developed a second, transparent eyelid. I dreamed of home, she told him weakly. Cold moons of Cerealia, crystal cities, but felt distant, like memory of someone else. Your brain is likely changing too, June said, forming new neural pathways. He helped her from the tub and gave her fresh clothes, his clothes, much too large but clean and dry. As she changed in the bathroom, he heard a sudden crash. Hannah, He found her staring at her reflection, a shattered glass on the floor. Her facial structure had subtly altered overnight. Cheekbones higher, jaw more defined. But most striking were her eyes. The iridescent purple had intensified, and thin, web-like patterns now radiated from her pupils. "Not me," she whispered, touching the mirror. "Not cerulean." "You're still you," June insisted, carefully collecting the broken glass. "Your appearance is changing, but your mind, your memories, those are still yours." Hannah turned to him, sudden anger flashing across her features. "You cannot understand. My people same for 1,000 years. Change is forbidden. If they see me now." She trailed off, looking down at her transformed body. "They will call me monster." The outburst drained her remaining energy. She slumped against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. June cautiously sat beside her. "On Earth, change is the only constant," he said quietly. "Every species here evolves or goes extinct. Humans have changed more in the past few thousand years than in the million years before. We adapt. It's our strength." "Not cerulean way," she replied, but her voice had softened. "Maybe that's why your people never visit planets like Earth," June suggested. "The environmental pressure forces change." Later that day, as Hannah rested, June continued analyzing her blood samples. What he found amazed him. The Earth bacteria weren't just helping her adapt. They were accelerating the process exponentially. Her DNA remained fundamentally cerulean, but expressions of certain genes had altered dramatically. The bacteria appeared to be providing new information, teaching her cells how to thrive in Earth's conditions. When Hannah awoke, she seemed different, calmer, more focused. She walked to the kitchen with newfound steadiness and began examining the food supplies. "Hungry," she explained, selecting fruits and vegetables with confidence. "Need fuel for changes." "You're accepting it now?" June asked, surprised by her shift in attitude. Hannah considered before answering. "Had revelation while sleeping. Ceruleans fear change because we never needed it. Our world stable, cold, perfect for us." She bit into an apple, savoring it. "But universe not stable. To explore must be willing to change." As she ate, June noticed that her movements had become more fluid, almost graceful. The adaptations weren't just survival mechanisms, they were improvements. Her senses seemed sharper, her reflexes quicker. "Do you still feel like you're burning?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "but different now. Not pain, but energy." She held up her hand, examining the new patterns forming in her skin. Like fire transforming, not destroying. That evening, they sat outside as the temperature dropped. For the first time, Hannah didn't need extra cooling to be comfortable. "Stars same," she observed, looking up at the night sky. "Can see my home star from here." "Are you still trying to contact your ship?" June asked. "Yes," she said, "but not sure what I will tell them now." She turned to him, her transformed eyes reflecting the starlight. "Not sure if I belong with them anymore." The biological crisis wasn't over. Her body continued to change daily, but something fundamental had shifted. Hannah was no longer fighting the transformation but embracing it. Whatever she was becoming, it would be something new to both their worlds. The crack of a branch outside the cabin woke June from a light sleep. He sat up, instantly alert. Something wasn't right. Beside him, Hannah was already on her feet, her enhanced senses having detected the disturbance before he did. "Someone is watching," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Many someones. June peered through the window blinds. In the pre-dawn light, he could make out dark figures moving through the trees surrounding his property. They wore tactical gear and carried what looked like military-grade weapons. "Government agents," he breathed. "They must have detected your escape pod's energy signature." Hannah's eyes narrowed, the new membrane flickering across her iridescent purple irises. 7 humans. Armed. Moving to surround cabin. June grabbed his backpack, already prepared for this possibility. "We need to go." Now, there's a tunnel from the cellar. It was used during Prohibition to smuggle alcohol. It comes out half a mile away in the forest. As they moved silently toward the cellar door, a powerful voice boomed through a megaphone outside. "This is Special Agent Kim of the Advanced Threat Response Unit. We know you're harboring a non-terrestrial entity. Come out with your hands up. You have 30 seconds to comply." "How did they find us?" June whispered as they descended into the cellar. "My communication attempts," Hannah replied, regret in her voice. "They must have detected the signals." June pulled aside an old bookshelf, revealing a narrow tunnel entrance. "This way." They had barely entered the tunnel when they heard the cabin door being breached above. Footsteps pounded on the floorboards as the agents swept through the house. "Search the entire property," Agent Kim's voice ordered. "The alien cannot escape." June and Hannah moved quickly through the narrow passage, crouching to avoid the low ceiling. The air was musty and thick with decades of disuse. After several minutes of careful progress, they reached the exit, concealed by overgrown bushes on a hillside. June cautiously pushed aside the foliage and peered out. The forest seemed clear, but he knew the agents would have the area surrounded. "What now?" Hannah asked, her breath coming easily despite the exertion. Her body had adapted remarkably over the past weeks. "We need to reach my friend's cabin about 10 miles north," June explained. "He's a former colleague who values privacy as much as I do. We can regroup there." As they emerged from the tunnel, a shout rang out to their right. An agent had spotted them. "Run," June yelled, pushing Hannah ahead of him. They sprinted into the dense forest, weaving between trees. To June's astonishment, Hannah moved with incredible speed, her newly evolved physiology giving her strength and agility beyond human capability. She grabbed his hand, practically pulling him along. "They're following," she said, her enhanced hearing tracking their pursuers. 3 humans, coming fast. June was already breathing hard, but Hannah seemed barely affected by the pace. They reached a fast-flowing stream, the water churning over rocks. "We need to cross," June gasped. "It will mask our scent if they have dogs." Without hesitation, Hannah lifted him as if he weighed nothing and leaped across the 15-foot span of water. They landed safely on the other side, June staring at her in amazement. "How did you?" "New muscles," she explained simply. "Higher oxygen efficiency. Keep moving." They continued north, Hannah setting a pace just slow enough for June to maintain. When his energy flagged, she wordlessly offered support, her strength seemingly limitless. The sounds of pursuit gradually faded behind them. By midday, they stopped in a small clearing to rest. June collapsed against a tree trunk, exhausted. Hannah stood vigilant, her senses scanning their surroundings. "I don't understand," June said between breaths. "The physical changes in your body, they'd gone beyond simple adaptation." Hannah nodded. "Earth microbes in my system have accelerated evolution. Each cell now carries combined knowledge, Cerealian biology, Earth adaptation. It's incredible," June marveled. "Your species evolved for stability, but when forced to change, you do it more efficiently than anything I've ever seen." A distant sound caught Hannah's attention. She tilted her head, listening. "Helicopter. Coming this way." They moved on, keeping under the forest canopy where possible. As they traveled, Hannah revealed more about what she had learned before the crash. "My ship detected other Cerealians on Earth," she explained. "Research teams sent earlier. No contact for months." "You think they were captured?" June asked. "Yes. Likely by sane humans hunting us now." By late afternoon, they reached a steep ravine. The only way forward was to climb down and up the other side. As they carefully descended, loose rocks gave way beneath June's foot. He slipped, falling toward jagged rocks below. Hannah moved with blinding speed, catching his arm and pulling him to safety. Her reflexes had become almost preternaturally fast. "Thank you," June said, his heart pounding. "You saved my life." Hannah looked at her hands, seemingly surprised by her own abilities. Not just physical changes. Mine different too. Think faster. See patterns. They made it across the ravine and continued their journey. As night fell, they reached a vantage point where they could see lights in the distance, a small facility nestled in the mountains, surrounded by security fencing. "That's not my friend's cabin," Jun said, confused. Hana's eyes focused with unnatural precision on the distant compound. "Cerulean energy signatures. My people are there." "How can you tell?" "New sense developing," she explained. "Can detect specific energy patterns now." Jun studied the facility through his binoculars. "That looks like a government black site. Maximum security." "Must help them," Hana said firmly. "Hana, we can't just walk in there. That place will have the highest security protocols in existence." She turned to him, her transformed eyes glowing softly in the darkness. "Not asking you to come. Too dangerous for human. If you think I'm letting you go alone after everything we've been through, you don't understand humans very well," Jun replied with determination. Hana smiled, a rare expression that transformed her face. "Understanding humans better every day. Your adaptability not just in body. In mind too. Face danger for others. Take risks to help." They watched the facility for hours, noting patrol patterns and security measures. Jun was amazed at how quickly Hana processed the information, creating a mental map of the entire compound. "We go tomorrow night," she finally said. "I can sense 5 Ceruleans inside. Still alive, but weak." As they settled in a well-concealed spot to rest, Jun realized how much their relationship had changed. He had started as her reluctant host, then become her caretaker. Now she was protecting him, her evolved abilities far surpassing his human limitations. "What happens after we free your people?" he asked quietly. Hana looked up at the star-filled sky, her expression thoughtful. "Don't know. Ceruleans may reject what I've become." She turned to him. "But learned important thing from humans. Change not always bad. Sometimes necessary for growth." With government agents hunting them and a heavily guarded facility ahead, Jun knew their chances were slim. Yet watching Hana's confidence and determination, he felt something he hadn't expected: hope. In just weeks, she had transformed from a vulnerable alien struggling to survive into something remarkable. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The night air was cold, and still as Hana and Jun approached the government facility, floodlights cast harsh illumination on the chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guards patrolled the perimeter at regular intervals, their weapons visible even from a distance. "Last chance to turn back," Jun whispered as they crouched in the shadows. Hana shook her head, her iridescent eyes reflecting the distant lights. "My people suffer inside. I feel their pain." She had changed even more in the last 24 hours. The blue of her skin now had a subtle pattern of lines that seemed to shimmer when she moved. Her reflexes had become lightning fast, and she could now go hours without blinking, her new membrane keeping her eyes moist. "Remember the plan," Jun said. "I create the distraction at the east fence. You enter from the west. Find your people and meet me at the rendezvous point in 1 hour." Hana placed a cool hand on his arm. "Be careful, human. Your body does not heal like mine now does." They separated, moving silently through the forest. Jun circled to the eastern perimeter while Hana headed west. When he reached his position, Jun checked his watch and waited for exactly 11:30 p.m. Shift change for the guards, as they had observed. Right on schedule, Jun set off the first of several small explosive devices he had created from materials in his backpack. The blast wasn't large, but it sent up a shower of sparks and smoke in the forest east of the facility. Alarms immediately blared as guards rushed toward the disturbance. On the opposite side, Hana moved with inhuman speed. When a momentary gap appeared in the patrols, she leaped, clearing the 12-foot fence in a single bound. She landed silently on the other side, sticking to the shadows as she approached the main building. Inside the facility, Agent Kim was reviewing footage of the alien they had been tracking. The images showed a blue-skinned humanoid female with distinctive ridged features, the same alien they had nearly captured at the cabin 2 days ago. "Sir, we have a perimeter breach on the east fence," a security officer reported over the radio. Kim frowned. "All units respond. This could be an attempt to free the specimens." As guards rushed to secure the east side, Hannah slipped through a side entrance. Her enhanced senses detected 5 distinct cerulean energy signatures coming from below ground level. She found a stairwell and descended rapidly, avoiding the few remaining guards with ease. The basement level contained a series of reinforced doors with small observation windows. Hannah moved quickly down the corridor, peering into each room. In the third, she found what she was seeking: 2 Ceruleans strapped to examination tables, various monitoring equipment attached to their blue bodies. Using her newfound strength, Hannah broke the electronic lock and entered the room. The Ceruleans' eyes widened in shock as they saw her. "Hannah," one of them gasped in their language. "Is that you?" "Yes, Captain Minho," she replied, quickly working to free him. "I've come to rescue you." "What happened to you?" the other Cerulean asked, staring at her transformed appearance. "Your skin, your eyes. Earth changed me," Hannah explained as she removed their restraints. "Can you walk?" Both Ceruleans stood shakily. Unlike Hannah, they had not adapted to Earth's environment. Their movements were slow, their breathing labored. "The others?" she asked. "3 more," Minho confirmed. "Next rooms." Hannah freed the remaining Ceruleans, all scientists from her research team. Each reacted with the same shock upon seeing her transformed state. "What have they done to you?" asked Suji, the ship's medical officer. "Not them," Hannah corrected. "Earth itself. The microbes. The atmosphere. They changed me so I could survive." "You're contaminated," Suji whispered, backing away slightly. "This level of biological change is forbidden." "Forbidden or not, it saved my life," Hannah replied firmly. "And now it will save yours. Follow me." Leading the weakened Ceruleans through the facility proved challenging. They moved slowly, struggling with Earth's gravity and atmosphere. When an alarm suddenly blared directly above them, Hannah knew they had been discovered. "Hurry," she urged, supporting 2 of the weakest members. They reached a loading dock at the rear of the building. Outside, searchlights swept across the grounds as guards regrouped from the eastern distraction. The rendezvous point with June was still 500 yards away through open terrain. "We'll never make it," Minho said, his breathing labored. "They're too many, and we're too weak." Hannah assessed the situation with her enhanced senses. "Stay here," she instructed. "I'll clear a path." Before they could protest, she slipped outside. Moving faster than human eyes could track, she disabled the nearest guards silently, one by one. When a clear corridor opened, she returned for her people. "Now," she whispered, "straight to the trees." The Ceruleans followed, stumbling across the open ground as Hannah deflected attention, creating small diversions where needed. They had almost reached the forest edge when floodlights caught them in their glare. "Halt!" Agent Kim's voice boomed over a megaphone. "You are surrounded." Guards appeared from all directions, weapons raised. Hannah pushed her fellow Ceruleans behind her, facing the humans defiantly. "Let them go," she called out. "They're scientists, not threats." Agent Kim approached, his gun aimed at her. "Interesting. You speak our language now." His eyes narrowed as he took in her transformed appearance. "What are you becoming?" "Something your world created," Hannah replied. "Something new." A sudden explosion from the far side of the compound drew everyone's attention. In that moment of distraction, June appeared from the forest edge, driving a stolen security vehicle directly toward them. "Get in," he shouted as he skidded to a stop. The Ceruleans scrambled into the vehicle as Hannah fended off the guards who recovered quickest. She leaped into the back as June accelerated away, bullets pinging off the reinforced body of the truck. They escaped into the forest, abandoning the vehicle when the terrain became too rough. For hours, they moved on foot, Hana supporting her weakened companions, while June led the way to a hidden cabin deeper in the mountains. 3 days later, as they monitored radio frequencies for news of the search, Minho approached Hana. The Cerulean captain had been watching her, with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "The ship has responded to our emergency signal," he said. "A rescue vessel will arrive in Earth orbit tomorrow night." Hana nodded. "Good. You all need to return home for proper medical care." "You speak as if you're not coming," Minho observed. "I'm not," she replied simply. "I can't." The other Ceruleans gathered around, their expressions troubled. "You must return," Suji insisted. "Perhaps our scientists can reverse these changes." Hana smiled gently. "Why would I want that? I'm not ill, Shuji. What's happened to me isn't contamination. It's evolution. This goes against everything our society values," Minho argued. "Stability, purity." "Perhaps that's why we never truly understood other worlds," Hana interrupted. "We fear change so much that we miss its benefits." She gestured to her transformed body. "I'm stronger, faster, more resilient. I can survive in environments no Cerulean ever could." "But you're no longer one of us," another scientist said softly. "I'm still Cerulean," Hana corrected. "But I'm something more now too. I bridged 2 worlds." June watched the exchange silently from across the room. When the Ceruleans finally moved away, he approached Hana. "You're really staying?" he asked. She nodded. "My place is here now. I can help prepare humanity for wider galactic contact. And," she hesitated, "I want to learn more about this world that changed me." The next night, as the rescue ship hovered invisibly in the sky above, Hana said goodbye to her people. They still regarded her with uncertainty, but there was respect there too. "Tell our world what you've discovered here," she told Minho as they prepared to depart. "Tell them that change isn't always to be feared." As the transport beam took the Ceruleans up to their ship, Jum stood beside Hana, watching the faint shimmer in the night sky. "What now?" he asked as the ship disappeared from view. Hana turned to him, her transformed eyes reflecting the starlight. "Now we evolve," she said simply. "Both of our species have so much to learn from each other." She looked up at the vast expanse of stars above them. Her body had changed, evolved into something neither fully Cerulean nor human. But the greatest evolution had been in her mind, in her understanding that adaptation wasn't weakness but strength. In embracing change rather than fearing it, she had found not just survival but a new purpose. "Human," she said, using the term that had once been foreign but now felt like a bridge between worlds. "You taught me something important. Life isn't about maintaining what you are, it's about becoming what you could be." Together, they turned away from the stars and walked back toward the cabin. 2 beings from different worlds, facing an uncertain future, but facing it together.